I'd like to get Maude and Esther back together. I had a bit of a disaster. One of the bolts snapped.
Well, that was silly, wasn't it?
After double checking the thickness of Esther's new set of cam buckets, actually fell apart. Time to fire Esther into life.
Not for sale, not for sale.
With a little help from my trusty club hammer. I don't know what oil it's supposed to be. I'm just going to chuck some of this gear oil in. Something's better than nothing, right? Hello and welcome to this video. I'm Marcus Hayes, and in this video I'd like to get Maude, my moredoor Mk2 Escort, and Esther, my SD170 powered Mk1 Escort, both back together and back on the road. Will I manage to do it? There's only one way to find out, so I'm going to cue some music now and I'll see you round Maude's garage now. With Maude out of the garage, I decided to start by fitting the adjuster ring retainers that I forgot to fit in the last video. But I had a bit of a disaster. One of the bolts snapped inside the bearing carrier.
Well, that was silly, wasn't it? Not the first time I've snapped a bolt, and probably won't be the last. To be honest, it felt like it didn't need a lot before it snapped. So I don't know if the bolt was already weak, but that red gun is a lot stronger than the little DeWalt ones that I've got at both garages. So yeah, I do need to be more careful with that red gun. I don't have any torque wrenches at the garage at home, but I'm pretty sure I've got a couple of spare ones at the other garage. So maybe I need to take some torque wrenches to the garage at home. But anyway, what's done is done. And now we're going to crack on with plan B, which is to go and get Esther back together first. So I'm heading over there now. I think I've got all the cam buckets, you know, to the right sizes. I think they're all bang on except for one. So the plan is to basically put Esther's engine back together and run her up to temperature, and then we can re-measure and check how well or how badly I've actually done all my calculations and stuff.
Once I got to Esther's garage, I moved her strut brace and her rocker cover out the way, and then I started working out which cam buckets were going to go where from the calculations that I made before. After double checking the thickness of Esther's new set of cam buckets, I removed all her old buckets with a magnet, which at one point actually fell apart. Luckily I was able to fish all the bits out of Esther's cylinder head, and once her old buckets were removed, I simply installed the new ones into their positions. The bottom end was already at TDC, but I didn't have the timing pin before, so I screwed that into the block and then made sure that the crank was leaning against it. Then I removed the cam caps, noting which position each one came from. In went the cam shafts. Back in went the cam caps, which were then torqued up to 10 Newton meters and then torqued up to 19 Newton meters. Next I pushed the timing bar into the slots at the back of the cams to lock them in the TDC position before refitting the cam belt back onto the cam sprockets, which were still loose at this stage. I then tensioned up the cam belt before nipping up the cam sprockets, and then it was time to check that the engine was in time. So I removed the timing bar from the back of the cams, then removed the timing pin from the block, and then turned the engine over a couple of times before reinstalling first the timing bar, then the timing pin, and then I removed the timing bar again. The engine wasn't able to turn at all, that meant it was all timed up correctly, so I could remove the timing pin for the final time and refit the stud and nut in its place. Next it was time to torque up the cam sprockets. I I used my big adjustable spanner to hold the camshafts still and torqued up the exhaust cam to 60 Newton meters and the inlet cam's VVT pulley to 120 Newton meters. Next to go on was the bung in the end of the VVT pulley. Then I refitted the spark plugs and the rocker cover. And with the HT leads and engine breathers hooked back up, it was time to fire Esther into life.
She feels so slow. Yeah, I basically forgot how rough this thing runs when it's not warmed up. Not for sale, not for sale.
Everyone's got their price, brother.
When I got back to Esther's garage, I set about removing everything I needed to then take her rocker cover back off. Out came her spark plugs again, which was going to make her engine easier to turn over by hand. And then, as the sun went down, I went through the process of measuring all of her valve clearances with my feeler gauges.
Hello, into a new day, and yesterday I was just about able to measure Esther's valve clearances as it was getting dark, and the results look promising. It's worth noting though that I don't actually know how tight the feeler gauge is supposed to feel, so a lot of the time I'm just trying different feeler gauges until, you know, the next size up literally won't go in the gap. Anyway, here's the results that I got. So I started on the exhaust side and I started at the front here, and if I've got a T next to it, that basically means that it's very tight. So, you know, these ones measured 11 very tight, you know, a 12 didn't go in there at all, but an 11 just about went in there. So in reality, that might be a 10 foul, or it might be a, you know, a 10.5 foul. I don't know. But if we compare it to what it was when I measured it before, it was 17 foul. And according to A.L.DEVELOPMENTS, the exhaust side should be 10 foul. So whether that is an 11 or whether that's a 10 in reality, you know, it's way better than a 17. And yeah, here's the rest of the measurements that I found on the exhaust side. You know, they're all 11s or 10s, which is good. Now, when I got to the inlet side, it really was getting dark, so I didn't bother, you know, writing all the measurements down. But basically, this was the one that I knew was going to be wider than the others, because I wasn't able to get the bucket on that one the right size, and there wasn't enough buckets that were bigger than that size to, you know, grind down so that that one was exact. So yeah, I made this one a really tight 10 foul. Again, could have been a 9 foul in reality, I don't know. And all the others were basically a very loose 8 foul. And according to A.L.DEVELOPMENTS, the inlets should be 8 foul. So yeah, I found that all the rest were, you know, a loose but touching 8 foul. But I was able to get a 9 foul in there really tight. So, you know, they're all 8 or 9 foul. And this one was a 9 or a 10 foul. So yeah, really happy that the valve clearances are now, you know, way more optimal. A lot of you guys have been getting in touch to say that I shouldn't really be grinding down the buckets because they're case hardened. And you're probably absolutely right. But, you know, what I've done is at least confirmed that I've done all my calculations correctly, and then I can see about getting brand new buckets to replace the ones that were ground down, to be exact. And I obviously want to see if I can try and get one the right size to replace this one here. I did notice though, on the buckets that the company did grind down, it appeared that they'd ground a little bit from the inside where the valve touches, and then a little bit from the outside. And I can only guess that they've done that to, you know, try not to rub away all of the case hardening. But ultimately, whenever I search online for ST170 buckets, Burton Power is, you know, the only company that seems to come up in the Google listings. And when I went down there, I grabbed whichever buckets they had in stock which were suitable. So apart from going to Ford, I don't really know where else I'm going to get those buckets from. Hopefully Burton's will get some more in stock, or yeah, as I say, maybe I'll have to get in touch with Ford. But now that the valve clearances are more optimal, who knows, maybe Esther's got a few more horsepower in her engine. Now, one thing I will have to do next time I go around to Esther's garage is double check the cam belt tension. Because I've got an aftermarket tensioner pulley, the only way to sort of get it to the right tension is by twisting the bit of the belt that, you know, goes down towards the crank, and just making sure that you've only got like I think 180 degrees of twist in total. But because I did this job without removing the alternator belt and the front covers, I wasn't able to do that, and I had to use a lever bar to actually put the tension on the cam belt. So yeah, that's not ideal, so I definitely need to check that. But the belt didn't fall off during my joyride, so I'm confident that it's roughly the right tension. Now, before I left the garage yesterday, I did pick up my spare diff and my spare torque wrenches. I'm hoping that I can just take one of the bearing caps off of the other diff and, you know, replace the bit on Maude's where the bolt has snapped in. Yeah, I hope they're not sort of line bored or anything like that. We'll have to see. But yeah, the objective of today is to continue where I left off when I snapped that bolt in Maude's diff. So I'm going to get round to her garage now and crack on with that. Alright, so first job on the agenda is to replace this bearing cap with the snapped bolt for this one from my spare diff. I'm hoping that it's okay to do that. I don't have a stud extractor or anything here. Maybe I should have brought those from the other garage and tried to take the bolt out of the other one first, but we are where we are. I think I'm just going to loosen off this adjustable ring, maybe, you know, just by a few of these holes, and then I'll whip the cap off, fit this one, and then just do the ring back up by exactly the same amount of holes, and then yeah, put this retaining clip on just like I did on the other side yesterday, but without snapping the bolt this time.
The bearing cap from my spare diff didn't seem like it wanted to bolt on to Maude's diff. So I thought I'd try and encourage the snapped bolt out with my drill, and it actually worked.
Oh, look at that. Quality.
So then it was just a case of fitting the carrier back to Maude's diff, then retensioning the adjuster ring and installing the retainer, this time using a spanner instead of my gun.
Alright, apart from giving this thing another clean out with brake cleaner and putting a bit of gear oil in the bearings, this welded diff is as ready as it's going to be, so it's time to get it fitted to Maude.
With Maude jacked up, sitting on axle stand, I removed her rear wheels, her brake drums and her half shafts. I gave her diff a bit of a clean before pre-lubing the diff bearings with some gear oil. Then underneath the car, I gave her axle a thorough clean before fitting a brand new diff gasket and then the diff itself. I bolted the prop shaft to the diff whilst I was still under the car, and then it was time to get her new half shafts ready. I switched the long wheel studs over from her old half shafts. I started rebuilding the driver's side first, and with a bit of lube on the spline, the half shaft went in with a little help from my trusty club hammer. And once the half shaft was bolted in, I gave the brake shoes a clean and refitted the brake drum. But then I noticed a problem. One of the wheel studs had actually come loose from the hub, so I decided to use a wheel nut to make sure they were all fully pressed in. I could then refit the brake drum again, refit the wheel, and then repeat the process on the passenger side. With Maude back on the ground, all that was left to do was to put some gear oil in her rear axle. To make sure the diff was fully lubed up, I raised Maude's rear end slightly, put her in gear, and fired her up.
Alright, so Maude's rear end is back together and everything seems okay. So the next obvious step would be to take her for a rip in Mexico for a bit of a shakedown run. But there's one little thing I want to have a look at first. Alright, so I've been messing about quite a bit lately with Maude's steering rack, and when I took this plate off before, loads of you got in touch to say that it was very dry in there and yeah, I should lube it up. Now I would assume that there should be grease inside the steering rack, but loads of you said that it's actually supposed to be oiled. I don't know what oil it's supposed to be, but I'm just going to chuck some of this gear oil in that I just put in Maude's axle. Something's better than nothing, right? So I'll just take this plate off, get the shims and the little bit of plastic, and I think there's a spring in there, out of the way, pour some oil in there and put it back together. 3 shims. And we've got a spring and a rubber seal. And then there's a bit of plastic. Don't know how much is supposed to be in there, but sorted. Now let's hit the road.
Well, she definitely feels a whole lot better than I remember, which is to be expected. You know, I have changed every poly bush on her rear end. And yeah, it's great to have this thing back on the road. I think the next thing I'm going to look at in terms of trying to get her to feel better on the road is the play in her front legs. There's like an insert, I think it's like a bronze bush that you can change. I think there's 2 on each front leg, and I've had a look online. There is a guide of how to do it. It's a bit of a bitch of a job, but yeah, I think, you know, if I can take that play out of the front legs, it's going to make another big difference to how this thing feels on the road. Now, I can't be out too long because me and my beautiful girlfriend Kat are going to the gym today, and yeah, she's waiting for me. I don't want her to have to wait too long, but yeah, we'll have another little play before we put her away.
Alright, so just finished up what was a mission of an edit on this video and realised that I didn't film an outro. Hope you enjoyed watching Esther and Maude finally come back to life. But yeah, got so much planned for both of the cars, so stay tuned to the channel for future videos. Got to send a huge thanks out to everyone who has been a part of getting Maude and Esther back on the road. I will of course leave all the links in the description to anyone that I've mentioned in this video. So if you did think this video was any good, please do give it a thumbs up and a share. If you didn't, give it a thumbs down. Click subscribe if you're new. Feel free to follow me on Facebook, TikTok and Instagram. Check out my website for merchandise and parts. Massive thanks to all my patrons for your ongoing support. I'll leave all the links to everything in the description as usual, along with my email address for anyone who wants to contact me. But other than that, until next time, thanks for watching.